good afternoon. I know how many of you may have joined us on our recent virtual event, the High Rise Insider's Structural Integrity. We did receive some additional questions during the event on which our experts are ready to give some insight. So I'm just going to kind of read through these questions. And one of them, I'm going to go back to the MEP arena, which is what Damien and Rodney chatted about a little bit with mechanical and electric and plumbing. Our association has structural and drainage issues with our building and parking garage. Where should we begin to address these? So Rodney, maybe you can start with that.
Well, we find a lot where, properties, always have, drainage issues, waterproofing issues. And again, during those inspections, identifying those issues, and then, bringing in experts that can certainly evaluate that and tell us, kind of where we need to be with that and what needs to happen. Is it, a much larger issue or is it a smaller issue? But certainly providing that insight back to the board is critical.
And Rodney, if I can jump into that question a little bit, I think, for instance, if there's a drainage issue, it's different. A solution might be different than a new construction where you design something, right? So now you have to retrofit a solution. And that often requires out-of-the-box thinking, like maybe you add additional drains to drain something that's not properly draining, because it's not practical to reslope the garage, right? Or build dams or slot drains or something to divert the water. So you have to kind of engineer the solution and you get the right people there.
I'd like to jump in as well, because the next question that ultimately the boards ask is, how are we going to fund this? How are we going to pay for this? And I think it's really important to engage in your reserve analyst to look at different funding scenarios, whether that may be a special assessment, maybe whether it be potentially financing or increases to your reserve contributions. Again, not thinking of the reserve study so much as a static document that you get once a year, but more as a financial planning tool to help you as your property changes and is dynamic to address those from a financial strategy point of view.
Super. Another question, and this might go to Kareem. So do engineering firms like ABB review cost estimates of specialty items like roofing, waterproofing, windows, and facade elements?
We do, and I think we touched on it a little bit before. We solicit bids from roofing contractors and waterproofing contractors and window contractors all the time. I mean, we're constantly getting subcontractor level bids. We're talking to the suppliers of the people as well as the subcontractors who are doing the work. So we have very current pricing in different regions, and we're spread all over the country. And the prices vary by region, and they vary by trade, and they vary by systems. So in order to provide accurate pricing, we work with our local office as to what the issues are, and to guide the association and to guide somebody like Damien to the proper level of budgets that may be needed.
Yeah, and to add to that, your reserve analyst is a budgeting expert. They're consultants in helping develop the budget. When Kareem comes into the equation, they're actually putting scopes together. And so when we can get that real-time data and incorporate that within your capital plan, it just makes it that much more accurate. So it's really important to ensure that you're not working in silos, but your vendors, your consultants are really in collaboration to ultimately give you that living capital plan so you can have a sustainable reserves.
Great, thank you. Another question is around warranties. So Heidi, maybe that's for you, but most developers offer a 1-year warranty. How long does a COA, condominium association, have to bring litigation after a developer for selling units in a building with construction defects?
So there's actually different warranties that are offered. So it's true that most builders only offer a 1-year workmanship warranty, but that warranty may also be augmented by a statutory warranty in Texas for structural issues. So there may be a longer warranty on certain components than there are for others. And so one thing to keep in mind too, when you're thinking just breach of warranty, the warranty is a contract. And so the breach of the warranty is actually a breach of the contract. And in Texas, you have 4 years from when you discover a breach of a contract to hold someone accountable on that breach. So even though you may only have a 1-year warranty, you probably have up to 4 years from breach of that contract to actually hold the builder developer liable. You also, of course, may have some protections under tort law on a negligence claim that would give you up to the 10 years that we talked about earlier to hold a builder developer liable. So if you have any question about whether or not a builder or developer may still be responsible for issues, I would suggest consulting with an attorney so they can really look at that and give you a correct answer on how long you have.
And a question that sort of is similar. So I'll just go ahead and ask you this, Heidi. Our building is only 1 year old and we are having numerous issues with the mechanical systems. Who should we contact to get an assessment to help us understand our options? And should we contact a law firm right away? So I think you touched on that, but I just want to make sure I get the question out.
Sure. So if you're within 1 year of the life of a building and you're having problems, you don't necessarily have to contact an attorney right away. You could contact someone like Kareem or other people who experts who can help you evaluate and understand the problem. So that's certainly an option to go to an expert first before you talk to an attorney. On the other hand, most attorneys who do construction defect litigation do that work on a contingency fee basis and advance those expert costs. So if you want to involve an attorney, that may be an option for you, and it may actually allow the association to get a better expert evaluation because you're not coming out of pocket for it, but rather the law firm is advancing those costs. So you have a couple options, and there's certainly financial ramifications either way. But again, I would encourage you to explore your options at that point.
Susan, I would kind of like to piggyback on that as well. One of the things we do many, many times when it comes to new buildings that, we go in and start managing is during the commissioning and the startup, once that building's handed over to us, we see numerous issues all the time. And a lot of those issues can be solved because, everything's not balanced out right. Everything's not been dialed in. And, we see this many times. We go into buildings where, everything's running at 100% and the building management system has not been tailored enough to, throttle everything back, run it efficiently. And during that time, as us balancing the building and, discovering whether it's a warranty issue, it's a design flaw or whatever, at that point, we are always bringing that to the board and advising them on whether or not it's something we can get the contractor to correct, because a lot of times, contractors will come back and during that warranty period and take care of that. But when they don't, is definitely when we want to get the attorneys involved and move forward. So that partnership is critical in the beginning of what I call the beginning life of a high rise and a building. So,
and if I could piggyback on that same question, I think that having someone like us involved in an inspection of an issue that comes up that early, I think we can also help identify if this is stemming from a construction defect that perhaps you need to hire someone like Heidi, or perhaps it is something that is, a fixable item that Rodney talked about, that you could work with a developer and get it corrected. And so sometimes that distinction has to be made, and it's good to have, the right types of people involved, like Rodney and us, to decide what, how you maneuver this problem.
And so really, Kareem, that feeds right into the next question. So what elements of the building are typically assumed to last the life of the building and usually don't require maintenance? Example, stucco, below grade waterproofing, concrete slab, foundation, soil issue, windows, podium slab, fire sprinklers, etc. So, a lot to cover here, but I guess the main question is, what are typically assumed to last the life?
So I'm going to strictly talk about high-rise buildings because I think that's what the focus is today. So in a high-rise building, what is expected to last the life of the building are the curtain wall systems. the exterior facade system, could be a metal panel, that kind of thing. It could be stucco, but often stucco is not used in a high rise. It could be EIFS. And EIFS actually does require maintenance, but with proper maintenance, it's expected to last the life of the building. The other things that are very important that are there for the life of the building are fire and life safety items, like 2-hour and 1-hour partitions. In case of a fire, the partitions keep people safe and partition and the fire from spreading from one location to another. So those things are never designed to be repaired or replaced or inspected at a later time. They're supposed to be built right the first time. So they're below-grade waterproofing. You mentioned it, and it was, the Champlain Tower that collapsed had waterproofing issues. In fact, it had no waterproofing, and that is not surprising. And in fact, I can name you several buildings in San Francisco, high-rise buildings built in the last 5 years, 10 years that didn't have any waterproofing. And I don't want to name the buildings because I don't want to put them down, but these are very, very prominent towers in San Francisco built in the water table without a waterproofing. I mean, just crazy things that developers do. So you really do need to, there are certain things like waterproofing that are designed, below grade waterproofing that are designed for the life of the building. And you want to make sure that they're done right. Structure, the whole structure, the concrete, the steel, all of those elements are designed to last the life of the building. The mechanical systems have a finite life. Some of the other systems have finite, but there are certain elements of the building that are designed for the life of the building.
Rodney, did you want to touch base on that at all?
Yeah,
Regarding,
again,
the extension of the life of equipment, correct?
Well, one of the things that, was brought up earlier and we all agree on is, boards have it in their mind that the plumbing system and, the sewer system will last the life of the building. When in turn, obviously, it's never something that's on the reserve study. It's never put in. Myself and Damien work all the time getting boards to add those onto the reserve study because essentially they only have a 20 to 25 year life expectancy. And in a lot of times, if they're not taken care of, even less than that. So, Susan, with us FirstService, we were one of the first that kind of implemented a preventative maintenance program for the building sewer stacks and system, where we go in on a quarterly basis, once, twice a year even, and run cameras down, look at the condition, determine, what needs to happen, and then address the problem, whether it's an enzyme, whether it's hydrojetting, in the high rise to ensure that we're getting good flow and we're not getting that buildup that builds up in those piping systems and prematurely wears the piping out. So again, reserve studies, you got to have that plumbing system on there. It is going to fail. And Kareem, you're the guy that comes in and whenever I have one that has to replace it, you're the guy that comes in and has to redesign the entire build back. And a lot of times that's destructive to, a homeowner's unit because those piping pass through their units. So the longer we can extend the life of that plumbing system and then fund for that replacement, man, that's the key to success in high rise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. That's probably one of your greatest opportunities. And if you take anything away from this in terms of being able to save money for your nonprofit, it's having a preventative maintenance plan around plumbing. I would say about 90% of the high-rise reserve studies we do have nothing incorporated for plumbing, and it will double your current replacement cost, right? And we're seeing stuff anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000 per unit, really for a budget number to be used in a reserve study. And so you can just do the math on your own units for your own high rises and to see what that would do. In terms of the change or delta from your current cost to what that would incorporate. Now, we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but I think incorporating that so that becomes a part of the conversation in terms of how you do your capital plan and when to bring in the experts at the right time to look at that and develop a preventive maintenance plan would really be critical to your success and meeting your fiduciary to maintain and protect the property value.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about cost, right? Because none of this is free, unfortunately. So when the last question I really have is, our association has always had problems getting owners to understand the need for assessment increases to fund reserves and asset maintenance, right? Do you, what do you suggest of how to get better owner buy-in? And I know that our experience is that, somebody said it earlier, communication, education, maybe you hold a town hall to review the reserve study, answer all those questions so that the owners have an understanding, right? But I guess I'm going to go to Rodney and Damien again on this one.
Yeah, and I'll start out and one of the things that we offer, Susan, and we do is that when a building has a reserve study, an association has a reserve study, through our inspections, through our preventative maintenance program, we review those findings, that data against the reserve study, so that when Damien comes in to do, an update on that reserve study or, a new reserve study, we're able to provide a lot of data that is going to match up to his useful life and the life expectancy of those components and the replacement costs. So in essence, I know we spoke about this earlier, but we see in the industry where, without a good preventative maintenance program, we may have a large motor that is on the reserve study. It says, Damien says it's going to last for 20 years, but we haven't taken very good care of it, as an example. And we see it like clockwork go out at year 13 because of overwear on the windings and the bearings and so on. And by being able to identify those issues when we take over a building and we inspect and test that equipment, we are able to provide that data to Damien that he normally would not have available to him, that he can predict the trending of it. He can predict useful life. So
yeah, I'm going to go a little bit higher on this one. And I'm going to go back to what I started with by sharing that, as a board member, you're overseeing a nonprofit corporation, and every corporation is a membership, and this corporation has a culture, and culture is predicated on values. And so my question to you is, what are the values of your corporation? Are they the values of trust? Are they the values of transparency? Are the values of educating? How are we communicating? Because ultimately this comes down to telling a financial story. It's like anything where we have to ask or do a raise, for a capital contribution, right? For any other nonprofit member organization. We need to get owner buy-in, and we need to tell that story of why they're funding the reserves and what the ultimate goal of this is, which is about protecting property value. We want to make your units marketable. And we need to remember that we have a fiduciary. So I think it's really key to think about it from that context, right? And then ultimately how we share that information and keeping it simple. Ultimately we can work in, we're big believers in collaboration, right? Having subject matter experts and incorporating that information in your capital plan is really critical. But ultimately remember, what is the story that we're telling and how are we sharing that information? Because we want to build trust, and with trust comes the ability to make that ask, and there's more buy-in, I would say, for those contribution increases, which we know are coming. Because everyone will share here. It's, all the vendors will share with you. You either pay now or you pay later, but you will pay. And so I think it's really critical to think about it from that context.
If I can say something on this answer as well, I think that one way for the association to potentially avoid a special assessment in its entirety is that you inspect carefully, forensically inspect your building before you lose your 10-year statute. Almost, I've been doing this for 35 years, and every time there's a special assessment and I look at it, I can predict that if I had been there during the first 10 years, I would have found these issues. But the special assessment, unfortunately, didn't occur until 20 years later, 15 years later. At that point, your statute of limitation has run out. You cannot hire someone like Heidi to go fix the building or get that money recovered. So to avoid the long term, your highest fiduciary responsibility is to not lose out on the insurance that you have, on this implied warranty that the state of Texas gives you. Okay, that you can go after the developer, you can go after the general contractor that built it and collect from him the what you may have needed in a special assessment 15, 20 years later. Don't lose out on that. Losing out on that is you're losing out on potentially tens of millions of dollars.
Good point.
Well, those were the only questions that came back following our first session. So Corrine, Damian, Heidi, and Rodney, thank you again for joining me to address those additional questions that came in from our board members. And we welcome any additional questions at all that might come in afterwards, and we will do our best to answer those in a timely fashion back to all of you. So with that, again, thank you so much for attending, and hopefully you'll walk away better informed. We're available here if you need us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.